This year, in 2026, we celebrate America's 250th anniversary, and it got me thinking about our own history right here in Souderton. This is a place where generations of people have built their lives, their businesses, and their families. Your home, the land that it sits on, the businesses you enjoy, and the institutions you rely on, they didn't just pop up in the time that you've needed them, and I think we take for granted those that came before us that made our community what it is today. And so the goal of this podcast is to interview Souderton Legends, just some of the people that made significant contributions to our community in their time. For some listeners, this may be a walk down memory lane. And for many, I hope it serves as a reminder and an inspiration to do good in your community in your time here. I'm Mayor of Souderton, Dan Yocum, and welcome to the Souderton Legends podcast. Today, I'm joined by our first guest, the inaugural episode, if you will, of this podcast, Jamie Allebach. Let me repeat that. Jamie Allebach, a Souderton legend in his own right and nephew of a true icon in the history of Souderton, former Mayor Charlie Allebach. Welcome, Jamie.
Thanks for having me, Dan. I feel the bar's been really set for me to come through on this first podcast, so I'm going to try to deliver.
Yes, well, I'm certain you will, and we don't know what we're doing, at least I don't, but I do have to thank you because this couldn't have been made possible without Jamie and his generosity of equipment and use of space for Allebach Communication. We're recording these right here on Main Street, Souderton, which seems extremely appropriate, and it couldn't have happened without you. So thank you, Jamie. Really, we really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Always happy to give back to the community.
Great. And also to Souderton High School, who the Souderton High School students are going to help edit these. And I'm sure there's going to need to be a lot of edits.
Young minds of creativity at work.
Yes, wonderful. So, Jamie, we're going to dive right in.
Let's do it.
The first thing I want to hear about, so we want to talk about a lot of things today. We want to talk about, of course, a focus on your Uncle Charlie, the mayor of Souderton. He is a legend in this town, and so I want to hear firsthand from you all about him. I also want to hear about you, a legend in Souderton in your own right, but I think it makes sense to start way back. So the Allebachs have been here for a long time. Can you tell us about your history here?
Yeah, so my uncle was a great part of this community, and to really understand his story and why he was so committed and entrenched in this community, it's a family thing. So unlike the Moyers and the Alderfers and the Bergies and the Clemmers and who had many family members that came over at different times, there was one Allebach that came over in 1718.
Wow.
He came over. Christian Allebach was his name. And we are all descendants. All of us Allebachs are descendants of him.
Christian Allebach. Wow. 1718.
1718.
Amazing. And where did he settle?
They settled right here in this. The area as we know it obviously didn't exist then. This would have all been considered Franconia, even as far as skip back.
Wow, yeah. 1718. Think about what it was here in 1718. Wooded nothing. I mean, you got to talk about a pioneer, really.
Yeah. He was actually one of the signers, and I think it was around 1745 that petitioned to have Salford split off from Franconia, which eventually became Lower and Upper Salford. But he was one of the signers on that petition.
Wow. So you go back right to the beginning, or even before. I mean, that's way
back.
Yeah.
But even if you go back to even a more not so, it seems ancient, but it's not really ancient. My great-grandfather, who would have been my uncle's grandfather, Jacob Allebach, was another icon here in Souderton. He had a grocery store right on Main Street underneath the Moyer and Son Mill. He was also an entrepreneur, did lots of land deals, had a house right on Chestnut Street. So he was he was a well-known person here in Souderton.
Wow. And what years was that roughly? The
He
turn
was
of the century?
he was born. It's hard to believe I have a great grandfather that was born in the 1800s, but he was born probably around 1860, 1865. I had to get the exact year.
But right here, I mean, the family,
right here in Souderton.
There's so many examples of that. A lot of new people in the area, and that's amazing too. But there's so many families that go right back to the founding, which is amazing.
My grandfather, Charlie Allebach, who I never knew, he was a namesake of my uncle, Charlie. He died in 1945. And so I never knew him, but he delivered groceries for a living right out of the office right next to us. And he was well known for his driving around Souderton and singing, out in the open air while he delivered. He had a big booming voice.
Maybe that's where you got some of your creative touch.
No question about it. It's in the family. My dad was a big singer, and just a little side note. So the siblings, my Uncle Charlie's siblings, which would have been my dad, his older brother Ken, and they had 3 sisters. They got together a lot, and one of their big things is after they had a few cocktails, is they would get around the piano and sing, and that all started with their dad, Charlie, gathering them around and singing. So they were a big singing family.
So that brings us to Charlie,
Yep.
who obviously that's why he had such a passion for town. His ancestral home is here, but people, I'm sure, know him. People might remember him just as the mayor, but he grew up here. So can you tell us what you know about his upbringing in Souderton?
So my uncle was he was larger than life to me growing up.
I think he was really. You and I compared notes a little bit before we started recording, and both of us had written down larger than life. That was Charlie's legacy. I think
my uncle. Ever since I was a kid, he dressed sharp, always had a 3-piece suit on. He had a watch collection that I always used to kid that you need to leave me those watches in your will, which he never did. Always had slick cars, he was fit. The guy, going shirtless was kind of an Allebach thing. They all did, but my uncle had the build to back it up. He was a fit guy. He was a bachelor. I used to brag to my friends that, hey, my uncle is Uncle Charlie. He's the mayor of Souderton, and yada yada. He was just he was a great guy. And every Thursday at 5 o'clock, he would come over to our house for cocktail hour. Him and my dad would have cocktails and cigars, and I would get caught up on all of the dirt. But he grew up right here in Souderton on Price Street, which is now Fifth Street, and he grew up in a twin. And him and his brothers, they slept in the 3rd floor of the twin, which had no heat, no air conditioning.
Mm-hmm. And this is in like the 30s, probably. I think he graduated in 1938, if my math is right on that.
Correct. Yeah, my dad graduated in 43. He was five years before that. So he grew up and lived in Souderton.
Imagine Souderton in the 30s. That's you're coming out of. Or you're in the Depression, and the modern conveniences that we have now don't exist, but some of the same businesses still exist, which is pretty amazing to think about.
Very humble living. He would say they only had meat once a week, typically on Sunday.
Wow!
And so they lived very humbly, very simply.
And so, other than obviously his family living here forever, do you know what may have inspired his what turned out to be a lifelong passion for serving the community?
Yeah. First, I do think it's important that to recognize that him and his brothers and even 2 of his sisters were all in World War II.
Wow.
So Uncle Charlie, he was stationed over in France, and he would always say that that's where he got his love for Mum's champagne, because he was stationed right near the Mum's champagne factory, and he said every payday he would go and get a case of Mum's champagne.
Wow!
So they all served, which I think is just an incredible statement.
Sure,
So,
and people around here, I don't think I knew that. I don't. Yeah.
So he went to work. I mean, all of them. They went to college on the GI Bill. Once they got finished with World War II, and my uncle was working in Philadelphia at what was called the Philadelphia Insurance Company of North America, and he would take the train into work and back every day
From right here, probably.
right here in Souderton.
Yep.
He would get on the train, and he was good friends with Charlie Hoflick, who was president of Union National Bank at the time. And they would have dinner typically every Friday night at the Century House, which was their favorite place and my uncle's favorite place. He would eat there nearly every day, one meal at least, lunch and dinner for sure. And he would repeat this story to me any number of times in his last years. And one of the lines that he would say was, Hoflick and I would be having dinner, and he was continually making overtures to me about hiring me. Overtures. What a great word, isn't it?
Yeah, I want somebody to sing overtures about me.
I do too. I mean, it's just a great word. And then, so he said, and then one time he offered me a job for $100 more a week than what I was making, and he said he would take the job.
And I think Charlie Hoflick, that is, if you listen to this podcast, I assume that's a name that's going to come up a lot, just like Charlie Allebach. I think he was a bigwig at the Philadelphia National Bank, so maybe they met downtown instead of out in Souderton.
Hoflick had an incredible talent for spotting talent. He would be able to spot people. He had a gift of being able to see someone and say, hey, this person has got great potential to do that. He saw that with my uncle. He saw it in Merrill Moyer, who was a teller and then eventually moved up to eventually be chairman of the bank. He saw it in many, many, many other people. So he had a gift for spotting people that had talent. Now, little be known to Hoflick is my uncle flunked out of teller training because he wasn't a numbers guy. He was a people
person. For sure. That defines everything about him, I think, as being a people person.
So Charlie Hoflick created a new position called the Community Relations, and that led to my uncle finding his niche.
Yeah. They couldn't have a more perfect job for a bank at that time. Of course, we're fortunate that Univest is still headquartered right here in Souderton. And if we have a couple guests that are related to Univest that will be on future podcast episodes. But at that time, they were truly a Souderton, Indian Valley community-based bank, and who better to be in that position than Charlie Allebach?
It became his passion and his career. He was dedicated to this community in ways that I have never seen.
Yeah,
anybody.
For sure. I think he was on the board of everything. Like, I don't think there's an organization that exists today that he probably didn't serve on. 25
organizations he was on the board for. He chaired many of those. He would say, the community was my family. I mean, he would literally, if you went over to his house, he had nothing in his refrigerator because he ate out for 3 meals a day.
I think that was his goal, right? And I heard that once, that it was his goal to eat out with people every single day.
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah, that is draining for most people, but amazing. And that's why he's an icon. I mean, really, he literally knew everyone. and so I'm guessing, so he became mayor, I believe, in 1970.
1970.
So how did that come about? I mean, I think Souderton in the 70s was booming.
Well, I mean, as part of his job in community relations, Charlie Hoflick was encouraging him to really get plugged into to the community. So he ran for borough council, and he was on borough council for a number of years, and then they just nominated him to be mayor.
Yep.
Imagine that.
Yep. And I think I remember reading articles where he was opposed here and there, but over the course of 40 years, he pretty much dominated that seat.
Who's going to run against him?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
he
was a legend.
He was so well loved in the community. He got such great joy out of walking around town, and people would say, "Hi, Charlie, hi," and he was just a recognizable, very beloved figure. But not just a beloved figure. You would be hard pressed, and I say this with all confidence, that I don't think that there is anyone or has ever been anyone in this community that raised as much money as that man did for nonprofits.
Yeah.
And I watched him do it firsthand. He just had a way about him where he would just walk into somebody's office and throw out a number, and sure enough, he'd get that number.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we're talking about him now. There is nobody, in my estimation, that is more iconic to Souderton in our history than Charlie. He just is. He was Souderton for decades. And I think the only reason that he resigned, I don't know how old he was at the time, is because he moved across the street from the borough to go to Souderton Mennonite home. Otherwise, he would be the mayor right up until he died, probably.
He probably would have.
And I gotta, since you mentioned it, I believe the legend always was that at Souderton Mennonite home you can't have alcohol, but you just talked about his fascination for the drink. So he had I think that it was well known he had it snuck in for him.
You never missed cocktail hour. I mean, cocktail hour was like religion in our family. It was 5 o'clock, and you did not miss cocktail hour.
He should live in Souderton now. I mean, now we have he would really be thriving now.
Absolutely, absolutely.
The other thing that he's like so legendary for is there isn't a person of a certain age that doesn't introduce themselves to me and say, "Oh, I was married by the mayor of Souderton." You know, Charlie made like a whole side industry for marrying people.
2,500 weddings.
Oh my God. How is that even possible? 2,500 weddings.
I don't know whether he was going for some kind of record or what, but he...
That is crazy. I mean, it's 37 years as the mayor, but still, 2,500 is everyone.
he took such great pride in marrying people, and he did some of the most unusual weddings. I think he talked about doing one in a hot air balloon, and I mean, I think he was going for outrageousness, you know, at every step of the way.
That is this larger than life thing that I keep coming back to, is like, he is a man that, you know, I don't know, you think you can't have a life like that living in a small town, especially at that time, but he did, and that is so cool.
I mean, there's so many things. I mean, during cocktail hour at our house, I mean, I heard things that I'm sure a small boy shouldn't hear, you know, especially about their uncle. But he was, like I said, he was living the bachelor life for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, feel free to elaborate if you feel it's appropriate, but no, you do not have to.
Yeah, my dad was a very proper man, so it was. You know, sometimes Charlie would cross over the line, you know, with my dad, and I would hear, "Oh, Charlie, I don't want to hear that," you know. But I remember back in the 70s, in particular, that this is when the Souderton Park was kind of in its, in its hippie prime, and my uncle had befriended, a group of young ladies again who once idolized them, and he somehow dubbed them Charlie's Angels. And they had T-shirts and everything. It was just, and understand this, for me as a kid in seventh grade, this was just like,
he was the man.
It's what every kid dreams of becoming. But I remember when I was in seventh grade, and I was looking to get a job, and he got me an interview at Zoto's Diner.
Oh, a fine dining establishment.
He did. And I was bussing tables there, and he told me very pointedly, he said, "James, I'm putting my name on the line here, getting you this interview. Don't screw it up."
And he was you didn't. Well, I don't know.
I didn't screw it up, no. And then, in fact, it led to another job a year or so down at the Holiday Inn. He got me an inn there, and I was moved up from bussing tables to washing dishes, which was a great step forward. And then summer of ninth grade, I was ready to start working full time. And he got me an interview at United Van Lines in Montgomeryville, which was owned by a gentleman by the name of Lou Macarella, who was another incredible Souderton guy. And again, don't screw this up, James. And that was hard work. And I'll tell you what, I learned so much in all of those positions. I learned about work, but I learned probably the most from Lou Macarella, who just taught me how to work hard, and my uncle, he did a lot for me, and I think many years later, 1990ish, when I started my ad agency, one of the first things my uncle did is he said, "James, you've got to get involved in the community. Have to get involved in the community," and he took me to my first chamber meeting.
Which he, I think, was a chair of, and they still have an award named after him for community service.
Absolutely do. And he just, there was no recommendations from my uncle. It was, "You're doing this."
Yeah. Well, it worked for him.
Period.
Yeah.
So he's there, "You're going to join the chamber." Okay. Sounds good. And I did.
And I do want to talk about that, and we can wrap up. We can continue to talk about Charlie, but obviously, I'm going to take a guess that you could have started your agency anywhere, but you chose to do it here on inspiration from your Uncle Charlie?
He was obviously part of my inspiration in starting here, but this is a town, and this is a community where I have deep roots, and I wanted to start a business here and be here in the community. I wanted to live and work in the community. We lived on Green Street at the time, 2 houses up from where my uncle lived. And so I wanted to be here in the community, and I knew there was opportunity here within this community, and the chamber was the first of many introductions. He invited me to Rotary and brought me into the Rotary Club, which was a life-changing event for me, where I met people that literally changed my life and sewed into my life and really made me the man and the business person that I am today. And I would not have had those opportunities if not for my uncle.
Yeah. So let's talk about you, because you are you're a legend in Souderton in your own right.
Maybe in my own mind, I don't know.
No, you really are. I mean, I want to talk about it more as we get into this conversation, but your business, Allebach Communications, is a juggernaut that I think people who live here probably don't understand. Like, the brands that you're representing out of this office on Main Street, Souderton, are huge national brands. Is that a fair statement?
It is a fair statement. I mean, we've worked with companies on a national and even international level over the years. And
are we allowed to talk about them?
Oh, for sure, we can talk about them.
Because I'm sitting under a giant sign, a giant artistic depiction of a cheese doodle.
Yep, Wise Snacks have been around for, since the early 1900s, and they're owned by an international company. We call it Arca Continental, and we've been working with them for years. Snack brand. Another Utz Snacks we've worked with. My company actually built the Atkins brand, the famous Atkins diet. Okay. We developed and designed that brand in the late 90s. We worked in the early years with companies like Sabra Hummus and Pretzel Crisps, the flat pretzels, when they were a young company, and helped build them into the $500 million organization. So we've worked with a lot of national brands, and I guess that so I pivoted our business when we first started out. We were working with a lot of local businesses here. And that was great. I learned a lot working with local businesses, and then I just decided I wanted to, carve out a specialty. So we started specializing and started doing more and more work in the food and beverage space, and then we became more or less national experts in that space. In fact, I always got. I'm a super competitive person, if you know me. Although at 63, there's not a lot of competitiveness in me, but it's still.
That's not true. I think
there.
You're still doing jiu-jitsu or.
I am, but just for kicks,
Okay.
But when we went up years ago, pitched the Entenmann's business, and we were in the ranks of large New York City firm agencies, big ad agencies, and here we are, this small ad agency from Souderton, Pennsylvania, and what we knew about the food business, we made the other agencies look, I don't want to say foolish, but I will say that, that they knew from listening to us that we knew far more about the food industry and could take them further than the other groups, and we won that piece of business. And I love going up against. I love the David and Goliath style stories. And
it is amazing. I mean, there are people who live in Souderton that drive by this building every day on Main Street and have no clue that level of output that you're doing. I mean, there's a famous now Steakums story somewhere here, right? I mean, that's a huge brand.
Steakums was iconic, and that's a lot of that is due to my son Nathan, who's kind of wackier and more creative than me, and he just got this was back in when social media was just kind of starting to get out there, and and he wanted to kind of do his own thing in social media and on Twitter, and didn't make a lot of sense to me, and then all of a sudden he just kind of caught fire with that thing, and he's interacting with big time celebrities and stars that all wanted to kind of get a piece of what was happening, but he brought international recognition. Yeah,
right here on Main Street. I can't get over that. That's pretty amazing.
We were from what he did, from what Nathan did with the Steakum account. It gave them publicity that they couldn't have afforded to pay for. Organizations like the Wall Street Journal were interviewing us and talking about the fame that we had brought that brand. So that was a huge deal for us and for them.
Yeah. I mean, national brands, that's amazing. But you also, let's talk, not to go backwards, but let's talk about those early days. I mean, you have, I don't know what exactly it looked like when you started, but at some point you moved into this building at 117 North Main Street. What did it look like? What was it before? Tell us about the history of this building.
Well, so we started out, the agency started out over in Ladder Rock in 1990 in the old post office there. It was a one-room office, and then moved to Harleysville. And then from around 95-ish, I moved the business into the old Indian Valley Printing, which was on Harbor Place, right behind Hunsaker's Pharmacy, neither of which exist anymore. So we moved the business in there, and these buildings here became available, and I ended up buying this building. It was completely gutted and redesigned and repurposed.
What was it before? Because it has a significant history in Souderton.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of history in this building, but this used to be the municipal building before the newer one that seems old now, but was built up in Summit Street, but this started as a waterworks building, but it took on many shapes and forms over the years. There's a great little plaque outside of our building, thanks to the Souderton Historical Society. It has a QR code, and you can click on that and get the full history of the building. But this is a great old building. And
I think you have a jail cell in here, or did.
The municipal buildings, I mean, they had great holding cells, and part of your proving ground as a youth would have been to spend a few hours at least in one of those holding cells.
Sure.
If you didn't, you really weren't making it.
When your uncle's the mayor, I think maybe you have an easy out from that cell.
I threw that card around one too many times in my teen years.
On Green Street. They all knew you on Green Street.
It was a stomping grounds.
Okay, so you're moving to this building. The business has been in operation for 10 years. Your early clients, do you have any that maybe you're still working with today, or you're particularly proud of those local people that made your...
Yeah, I mean, one of the earliest clients, I mean, we worked with Ziegler's Apple Cider in the early years. They've been bought and sold a bunch of times, so we're not working with them anymore. We did a lot of work with manufacturers in the area, but I have to say one of the most pivotal times in my career would have been in probably 1992. And do you remember Brooke Moyer?
Sure, of the Souderton Independent.
Yes, another family business. He was editor of the Souderton Independent.
He would be an interview guest if still alive.
If still alive, he would have been an icon. Well, on the side, he did writing and things like that. So, again, my uncle kind of pointed him my way, and he said, "Hey, I'm working on a brochure for Moyer and Son, and I'm wondering if you and your firm would design it." Well, my firm at that time was me and maybe somebody else. I don't know who it was, but there wasn't much of a firm. It was just me, and so he took me on a meeting over at Moyer and Son, and it was in the old Jacob Moyer house, who would have been a grandfather of John Moyer at the time. And at the time, it would have been John Moyer, his brother Bob. It would have been Ken and John Clemmer, who were owners of Moyer and Son. And I'm standing there waiting it wasn't even a waiting room. It was a house that was built into the office, and I hear these flying footsteps down the stairs, and around the corner comes John Moyer. His hair was, kind of puffed out and gray on the sides, and he looked like the mad scientist. I mean, full of energy.
Yes, that's right.
And if you knew John Moyer, you knew this guy was a charismatic, just dynamic business person. And that was my first meeting with John Moyer.
Truly another legend. I mean, John, that family business is probably the oldest in town, 160 years.
The oldest existing business.
And John, though not necessarily from here, definitely made this his community. I think he probably passed away less than 5 years ago, but definitely another icon.
He was born here, but moved out of the area and then came back in. And he saved the business. I mean, the business was on the verge of bankruptcy in the 70s, and John came in, turned the business around, and he did the same in my life as he turned me around.
Then he made the smartest decision he's ever made by hiring you as their agency.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know what it was. To this day, I say this. I've said this many times before. I don't know what it was, but for some reason, John took a liking to me, and we just hit it off, and it became a relationship.
I'm guessing he had seen your uncle once or twice at the Century House.
Oh my goodness!
Maybe just once or twice.
They were very, very well acquainted, and he knew when he was getting a meeting from my uncle that he was going to get asked for money, which he would give
generously,
to whatever. Mm-hmm. But that spawned a relationship. Again, that came through the pathway from my uncle, from Brooke Moyer to John, and John became one of the key mentors in my life. And I could honestly have a whole podcast just talking about John Moyer to be honest with you, because if you knew John, you most certainly did not know all sides of John, and I knew many sides of John. And John had a very distinctive way of crushing you and then moving on to like it never happened before. Mm-hmm. So he would teach in a way where he would just, I mean, he could be a harsh guy, and he would just, and I was young at the time, and he would just kind of crush me and then move on like it never even happened.
Sure. Yeah.
And it was a complete teachable moment for me, and I made mistakes young in my career that I would never make again. Because John was very pointed about things.
Good. Okay, so you have Moyer and Son, and I know recently, another huge example of work that you did was when Bergey's turned 100 years old. You were instrumental in their anniversary in their book. Correct?
Yeah, and that was more of a passion project for me. It was kind of funny how that came about. So they got my name from. Well, I knew the Bergeys, of course, from being in the community.
This is a Souderton Legends podcast. The Bergeys, of course, are that to a T.
Yeah, Mark Berge would be a great interview.
Although technically Franconia Township, but we'll forgive them for that.
Could be. It could. You could somehow get it in there.
We'll get across the line. Yeah.
But they got my name because I had worked on some other books, and not necessarily at this level of project. And it was kind of funny because I was almost saying things in a way that trying to dissuade them from using me. I said, well, I feel like I've got I've been doing a lot of historical work. I love history. I think I wouldn't consider myself a historian, but I really have got a good handle on Souderton history and local history. I said I've been a part of doing books like this before. I've been on a team, but I've never really done one by myself, but I feel very confident that I could. Imagine making that the pitch.
You're hired. Right?
Yeah, I mean it was basically everything to say, hey, I think I can.
Sure. And
maybe give me a shot.
Just if you turn 100 again, then if you screw this one up, you can try again at the 200.
That's right. But I think Glenda. Glenda Berge Leatherman, I think she had a sense that I was the guy to do it, and I'm really glad she did, because that was just such an amazing project to work on, and talk about a family and family business that has a story worth telling. The Bergies do.
Yeah, and an institution. Now, this is the whole purpose of this podcast, which for listeners will quickly learn. I don't know what I'm doing here and don't have a plan, but the plan is to celebrate these things that made us Souderton. And we've already talked about a lot of them. Your uncle started Union National, the Bergies, the Moyers. I mean, these are like the businesses that are still around, and Allebach Communication, which has been around for 35 years, right? They're right here in Souderton. So, yeah, it's pretty amazing. And one thing I also wanted to talk about, which still gets mentioned to this day, I am proud to say that Souderton is thriving right now, and we have lots of new businesses, and people want to come and live here, and you have lots of options to eat and dine. But at one time that wasn't the case, and yet you decided to open a business in this building that is still iconic today, even though I don't think it was really around all that long, and that is Main Street Java. People still talk about Main Street Java.
So I didn't start Main Street Java. It was I rented to them when they first had the idea of doing it, and it was a great idea. And after a few years, I ended up Jesse decided to get out of the business, and I said, well, I'll just keep it going. Which I did for a little while, and
it's just like today we almost take it for granted because of new businesses open here all the time, pretty regularly, and you have 10 options to eat at on any given night. But at that moment in Souderton's history, we were just on the cusp of revitalization, and I think that was huge and a little bit visionary.
Jesse Corbett, who started the business, he was ahead of his time, for sure, starting that, and it was a great business and a great concept, and in a different time, it could have been a huge success. But you're right, it's definitely a memorable piece of Souderton.
Sure, yeah. And then another cool thing I think about your business, you and your business, is that it is a family business, and you have the next generation that works here and is investing their lives in Souderton also. So isn't that pretty amazing?
Absolutely. Yeah, my son Nathan worked here for 10 years, and he decided to move on to the multi-gazillion jillion dollar tech company called Ramp, which he's again up to his social media shenanigans, doing great things for that company. And my daughter Ashlyn has been here for 3.5 plus years, and she is very community minded and
I just bought a house in the borough, I think. So come on.
She has 2 houses in the borough.
Talk about this conversation about Souderton. Here you are, how heartwarming that this is another family business, and yeah, like, of course.
Yeah, my other daughter teaches at the charter school.
That's right. Yeah.
Hey, we're a Souderton family here.
It's true. I mean, I think when I started getting involved in Souderton, I thought that there was this, like, I don't know, quiet but uncelebrated pride that people take by living in Souderton. And I think now that the town is kind of cool, like, people are proud to live here, and I love that. It's
proud to
cool.
be a Souderton townie.
Yeah, townie for sure. Yes, that is a badge I wear with pride as a townie.
Same here.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about, Jamie?
Well, I did want to kind of end with a little bit about my uncle.
Yeah.
He made such a huge difference in my life, and I know when he moved into the Souderton home, it was a big thing for him, because he towards the end of his life he couldn't get out and about like he wanted to, and that was the fuel that just kind of fed his life, and I put it in my calendar every Thursday morning, 10 o'clock, go visit my uncle.
Yeah.
And we would sit down and we would just talk about things, and he would just tell me the same old stories. Yep. Every week. Yep. Just tell me the same old stories. And, I didn't care. I just enjoyed listening to them and spending some time with him. And he would just kind of, just go on, and we would talk, and he would get to the point where he would be talking about all the work that he had done and that he wasn't doing it anymore, and he would make the statement, I think I can just rest on my laurels now, which was a great way of saying it.
Although he really was kind of like the mayor of Souderton Mennonite Home at that point too.
It was still going on and on, and as time went on and he was really getting towards the end, he would just make statements like, James, I really have led a good life.
Yep.
And it was true, and I remember, I read at his service and his eulogy, and and I said, at the end of it, I said, well, Uncle, you really have led a good life, and you can rest on your laurels now.
Yeah.
And it was just true. I mean, the impact that he had on my life and on so many others, it's just, it'll live on, for decades and generations to come, without a doubt.
Sure. He's been gone for 9 years, I think, and he has not been the mayor in 20 years, and yet here we are talking about him, and I still think he is one of these people that just, said it before, but larger than life, and he'll be remembered in Souderton for a long time. Well, Jamie, this has been great. I really appreciate your time. I think that we covered some ground about talking about the man, the myth, the legend, former Mayor Charlie Allebach.
We went full circle, didn't we?
And then we also talked about the man, the myth, the legend, Jamie Allebach. And I really appreciate it. And again, I want to say thank you for letting us use your beautiful space here at Allebach Communication. And tune in, because we have 9 more episodes of this podcast. Some great legends lined up.
I'm only standing in the shadow of those who came before me, but I appreciate you having me on, Dan. And it's been fun to talk and reminisce. And I hope it inspires others to be a part of this community. And the one last thing I will say that my uncle told me, he's there. All it would take is for one generation not to do anything in this community, and everything that is plentiful in the community that we love will go away. So people have to get out and do their part.
Yep. Hopefully this conversation has inspired you, tens of listeners.
Let's hope so.
All right, Jamie, thanks so much.
Thank you, Dan.